Teachers, what student situation made you break protocol and potentially lose your job? I found the bruises on Thursday morning during mandatory health screenings. Liam Crawford was 14 years old, honor roll student, never caused problems in my chemistry class. When he pulled up his sleeve for the blood pressure cuff, I saw 5 distinct finger marks wrapped around his bicep in purple and yellow. He jerked his arm away and pulled the sleeve down fast, but I'd already seen them. I asked him to stay after the screening while other students filed out. He stood there with his backpack clutched against his chest and wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked him directly what happened to his arm. He said he fell during basketball practice. I'd been teaching for 12 years and knew what grab marks looked like versus impact bruises. I told him I was required to report injuries that suggested abuse. His face went white and he started shaking his head. He begged me not to say anything. Said it would make everything worse. Said his father would kill him if anyone found out. That last phrase hung in the air between us. I told him I didn't have a choice. State law required teachers to report suspected abuse within 24 hours. Liam's eyes filled with tears, and he said his father was Detective Frank Crawford of the County Sheriff's Department. That reporting it wouldn't matter because his father's friends would bury it. That he'd tried telling a counselor at his old school, and his father found out and broke his ribs. I called Child Protective Services that afternoon and filed a formal report. The caseworker who took my information sounded tired and skeptical. She asked if I had photos of the bruises. I said no. The student had covered them before I could document anything. She asked if the student had disclosed abuse. I explained he'd denied it initially, but then revealed his father was a police detective and had hurt him before. The caseworker was silent for a moment. Then she said Detective Crawford was well known in the county, and that previous reports against him had been investigated and found unsubstantiated. She'd add my report to his file, but warned me that without physical evidence or a disclosure from the child, there wasn't much they could do. She also mentioned that making false reports against law enforcement could result in legal consequences for me. I said I understood and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Liam's terrified face when he said his father would kill him. The casual way he'd described having his ribs broken. The resignation in his voice when he said reporting wouldn't matter. I'd done everything by the book and it felt completely inadequate. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd just made things worse for him. Wondering if his father would punish him for the bruises being seen. Wondering if tomorrow Liam would show up with new injuries or not show up at all. Friday morning, Liam wasn't in class. I checked with the attendance office and they said he was marked absent with no call from parents. I tried not to panic. Maybe he had a regular appointment or was sick. But my instincts screamed that something was wrong. During my planning period, I drove past his house. It was a nice suburban home with a well-maintained lawn and an American flag hanging by the front door. Everything looked normal from outside. I felt foolish sitting there in my car, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd put that kid in danger by following protocol. I went back to school and taught my afternoon classes on autopilot. My mind kept wandering to Liam, to what might be happening behind those closed doors. At 3:15, I got called to the principal's office. Principal Denise Hartwell sat behind her desk with a man I didn't recognize. He was in his 40s, wearing jeans and a polo shirt, with a police badge clipped to his belt. Denise introduced him as Detective Frank Crawford. My stomach dropped. He stood and shook my hand with a grip that was just slightly too firm. He said he wanted to thank me personally for my concern about his son, that Liam had explained the misunderstanding about the bruises from basketball practice. He said he appreciated teachers who looked out for student welfare, but wanted to reassure me that his son was fine and well cared for. Detective Crawford's smile didn't reach his eyes. He said he understood I'd filed a report with CPS, and that was my right as a mandated reporter. But he wanted me to know that false allegations against law enforcement officers were taken very seriously, that his reputation and career could be damaged by unfounded accusations, that he hoped there wouldn't be any further misunderstandings. The threat was clear even though his tone stayed pleasant and professional. Denise jumped in to say she was confident this was just an unfortunate miscommunication and that everyone wanted what was best for Liam. Detective Crawford thanked us both and left. As soon as the door closed, Denise turned to me with a tight expression. She said I needed to be very careful about making accusations I couldn't prove, that Detective Crawford was connected throughout the county and could make life difficult for the school if he felt we were targeting his family. I asked if she was telling me not to report suspected abuse. She said of course not, but that I needed to have solid evidence before involving CPS, especially when it concerned prominent families. I left her office feeling sick and angry. The system was designed to protect children, but somehow it was protecting their abuser instead. I went home that evening and searched online for information about Detective Crawford. His service record was exemplary. Community awards, commendations, photos of him at charity events. Nothing that suggested he was capable of hurting his own son. Liam came back to school Monday. He had a black eye and a split lip. When I asked what happened, he said he got hit during basketball practice. I pulled him aside after class and told him I knew his father had done this, that I wanted to help him, but needed him to tell me the truth. Liam stared at the floor and said nothing happened, that he was clumsy and accident-prone, that his father loved him and provided everything he needed. His voice was flat and rehearsed. I asked if his father had told him what to say. Liam looked at me with dead eyes and said he needed to get to his next class. I watched him walk away and felt completely helpless. That night, I did something I'd never done in 12 years of teaching. I drove to Liam's house at 10 o'clock and parked across the street. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to see if he was okay. Maybe gather some kind of evidence that could force someone to take action. I sat there in the dark, feeling ridiculous and desperate. Around 11, I saw movement through an upstairs window. A shadow crossed in front of the light. Then I heard shouting. A man's voice, loud and angry. I couldn't make out words, but the rage was unmistakable. Then I heard a crash and a cry that made my blood run cold. The sound of something breaking and a boy's voice saying something that sounded like please or stop. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I reported hearing what sounded like a domestic disturbance at Detective Crawford's address. The dispatcher asked my name and I hesitated, then gave it. She said she'd send a unit to check. I stayed in my car watching the house. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers got out and knocked on the door. Detective Crawford answered wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. They talked for a few minutes. I saw him gesture casually, probably explaining away whatever I'd heard. The officers nodded and left. The whole interaction lasted maybe 5 minutes. They never went inside, never asked to see Liam, just took a cop's word that everything was fine and drove away. I sat there shaking with rage and frustration. I'd just watched the system fail a child in real time. Professional courtesy between officers meant more than a child's safety. I drove home and couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that cry, the sound of Liam's voice begging for something. The next morning, I called CPS again and spoke to a supervisor. I explained everything, the bruises, the black eye, the 911 call last night, the way patrol officers had taken Detective Crawford's word without investigating. The supervisor listened and said she understood my concern. Then she explained that they'd already investigated my initial report and found no evidence of abuse, that Liam had been interviewed by a caseworker and stated he was not being harmed, that continuing to file reports without new evidence could be considered harassment of the family. I hung up feeling defeated and furious. Liam was being beaten by his father and everyone knew it, but because his father wore a badge, the entire system looked the other way. I thought about dropping it, protecting my own career and letting someone else deal with it. Then I thought about Liam's face when he begged me not to report, his certainty that it wouldn't matter, his resignation to living with violence because no one would help him. I couldn't let that be the end of the story. That Wednesday, I did something that could cost me everything. During my planning period, I went to Liam's guidance counselor and said I had serious concerns about his safety at home. I detailed every bruise, every injury, every sign of abuse I'd observed. The counselor, whose name was Rita Gomez, listened carefully. When I finished, she pulled up Liam's file on her computer. She showed me notes from his previous school documenting concerns about injuries and his father's aggression at parent conferences. She showed me a hospital report from 2 years ago when Liam came in with broken ribs. The doctor had noted injuries inconsistent with the stated cause, but Detective Crawford had been present during the exam, and no report was filed. Rita said quietly that everyone knew Frank Crawford abused his son, but he was untouchable. She'd tried reporting it herself and got called into her principal's office and warned to drop it or face termination. She said 3 different teachers had reported concerns over the years, and all of them had been told to back off. One teacher had been transferred to another school after pushing too hard. I asked Rita what would happen if someone got proof. Real documentation that couldn't be dismissed or buried. She said it would need to be irrefutable. Photos, video, medical records, something that even Crawford's connections couldn't explain away. I asked if she'd be willing to help me get that proof. Rita looked at me for a long moment, then said she had 2 kids of her own and couldn't risk her job. She had bills and a mortgage and couldn't throw away her career for a kid who wouldn't even admit he was being abused. I understood. I had bills too. But I also had something Rita didn't have. I had Liam in my class every day, and could see what this was doing to him. The way he flinched when someone raised their voice. The way he isolated himself from other students. The way he was slowly disappearing into himself while everyone looked the other way. I told Rita I was going to get proof, that I needed her to be ready to act when I did. She said I was making a mistake that would destroy my career and possibly get me arrested. I said probably, but I was doing it anyway. That night, I bought a small camera that could record video continuously, the kind you could hide in a pen or a clock. I knew what I was planning was illegal, recording someone without consent, trespassing, stalking, but the legal route had failed completely. Every proper channel had been exhausted, and Liam was still getting beaten. I started following Detective Crawford's patterns. He worked day shift and got home around 6. Liam had basketball practice until 5:30, so there was usually a window when Crawford was home alone before his son arrived. I watched the house for 3 days, learning the routine. On Thursday evening, I did something I never thought I'd do. I snuck into their backyard while Crawford was in the shower. I'd seen the bathroom light go on through a window. I placed the camera on a fence post angled toward their back door and kitchen window. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it twice. Then I got out of there as fast as I could. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I'd just committed a crime. If I got caught, I'd be arrested. If the camera was discovered, Crawford would know someone was watching, but I'd run out of legal options. The next day in class, Liam had a bruise on his cheekbone. When I asked about it, he said he'd walked into a door. I looked at that bruise and thought about the camera recording his backyard and kitchen. I felt sick about what I was doing but couldn't see another way. That evening, I went back and retrieved the camera around midnight. Nobody was outside and I was in and out in less than a minute. I drove home with the camera in my passenger seat, feeling terrified and determined in equal measure. I took the camera home and plugged it into my laptop with my hands shaking. The footage was grainy but clear enough. I watched Crawford arrive home from work, watched him drink beer in the kitchen. Then around 6:30, Liam came through the back door carrying his basketball. Crawford immediately started yelling at him about something. I couldn't hear the audio clearly, but I could see Liam backing away. Then Crawford grabbed him by the shirt and shoved him against the wall. Liam said something and Crawford punched him in the face, just hauled off and hit his son in the face hard enough that Liam's head snapped back. Then he hit him again in the ribs. Liam crumpled to the floor and Crawford kicked him twice before walking away. The whole thing lasted maybe 30 seconds. I watched Liam pull himself up slowly and limp out of frame. I sat there staring at the paused video. I had what I needed: irrefutable proof that Detective Frank Crawford was beating his son. But I also had evidence obtained illegally that could never be used in court. I'd risked everything and gotten proof that might be worthless. I spent the rest of the night figuring out what to do. By morning, I had a plan that was probably insane, but was the only option I could see. I would take the video to Internal Affairs and confess to how I obtained it. Let them decide if protecting a child was worth overlooking how the evidence was gathered. Friday morning, I made copies of the video file. I saved them to 3 different flash drives and uploaded them to a cloud storage account. Then I called the county sheriff's office and asked to speak to whoever handled internal affairs complaints against officers. I was transferred to Captain Raymond Burton. I explained who I was, and that I had video evidence of Detective Crawford physically abusing his son. Captain Burton was silent for a moment. Then he asked how I obtained this evidence. I said I'd rather explain that in person. He agreed to meet me at noon at his office. I spent my morning classes in a fog of anxiety and adrenaline. At 11:30, I told the front office I had a doctor's appointment and left campus. I drove to the sheriff's department with my laptop and 1 flash drive. Captain Burton was in his 50s with gray hair and a skeptical expression. He asked me to show him what I had. I played the video of Crawford beating Liam. Burton watched without comment. When it ended, he asked me again how I got this footage. I told him the truth, that I'd placed a camera on Crawford's property without permission, that I knew it was illegal but every legal channel had failed and I couldn't watch a child be abused while everyone looked away. Burton leaned back in his chair and said I'd just confessed to multiple crimes including trespassing and illegal surveillance, that anything on this video was inadmissible in court, that Crawford could have me arrested and would probably win a lawsuit against me. I told Burton I understood all of that, but asked him to watch the video again and tell me it didn't matter. Burton looked at me for a long moment, then said he had kids of his own and couldn't imagine hurting them the way Crawford hurt his son, but he also had protocols to follow and evidence rules that existed for good reasons. I asked what he would do if this was his kid being beaten, if everyone with power looked the other way because the abuser wore a badge. Burton was quiet for a long time. Then he asked me to send him a copy of the video and leave. He said he'd review it with his supervisors and they'd determine next steps. He also warned me that Crawford would almost certainly press charges against me when he found out about the surveillance, that I should get a lawyer immediately. I thanked him and left. I drove back to school knowing I'd just ended my teaching career and would probably face criminal charges, but I'd done the only thing I could think of to save that kid. That night, I couldn't eat or sleep. I kept checking my phone expecting police to show up and arrest me. Around 10, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Captain Burton. He said Internal Affairs was opening an investigation into Crawford based on my video and other evidence they'd uncovered, that they'd been getting complaints about Crawford for years, but never had proof this solid. He said Crawford was being placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. He also said Crawford had been informed about the surveillance video and was threatening legal action against me. Burton suggested I prepare for that. I asked about Liam, and Burton said they were working with CPS to ensure his safety during the investigation. Saturday morning, my principal called. Denise said she'd received notice that I was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into unauthorized surveillance of a student's family, that the district was taking this extremely seriously and I should not come to campus or contact any students, that I needed to meet with district administrators Monday morning. I said I understood. Denise asked why I'd done something so reckless and illegal. I told her because a child was being beaten and no one would help him. She said I'd thrown away my career and possibly my freedom for nothing, that the video couldn't be used in court and Crawford would never face charges, that I'd destroyed my life for a piece of evidence that was worthless. I hung up. On Sunday, the story hit local news. Teacher under investigation for illegal surveillance of sheriff's detective. The article painted me as an obsessed stalker who'd violated a family's privacy and broken multiple laws. It mentioned that Detective Crawford was also under investigation, but framed it as retaliation for my illegal actions. My phone started ringing with reporters wanting comments. I turned it off. Monday morning, I met with district lawyers and administrators. They informed me I was being terminated for gross misconduct, that recording someone without consent on private property was illegal, and the district couldn't employ someone who'd committed crimes in pursuit of a personal vendetta. I asked if they'd seen the video of Crawford beating his son. They said the video was inadmissible and possibly fabricated, that I had no proof of anything except my own illegal behavior. I cleaned out my classroom that afternoon under the watch of security. 12 years of teaching and student art projects and science trophies all stuffed into boxes. I saw Rita in the hallway and she looked away. I saw other teachers I'd worked with for years avoid making eye contact. I was a pariah now, the teacher who'd crossed the line and lost her mind. As I loaded the last box into my car, I saw Liam standing near the building watching me. Our eyes met for a moment. He looked devastated, like I'd betrayed him somehow by getting caught. I wanted to tell him it was worth it, that someone needed to stand up for him even if it cost me everything. But security was watching, so I just got in my car and left. The following week was a nightmare. Detective Crawford filed a lawsuit against me for invasion of privacy and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He was seeking damages and a restraining order. My union refused to provide legal support because my actions fell outside my teaching duties. I had to hire a criminal defense attorney, with money I didn't have because the county was considering charges for illegal surveillance and stalking. The attorney, whose name was Gerald Foster, reviewed everything and said I was in serious trouble. The video couldn't be used to defend my actions because it was obtained illegally. I'd essentially confessed to multiple crimes in pursuit of evidence that had no legal value. He could try to argue necessity or public interest, but those defenses rarely worked. I was probably looking at criminal charges and would definitely lose the civil lawsuit. Gerald said my best hope was to negotiate a plea deal that kept me out of jail and minimized financial damages. 2 weeks after my termination, something unexpected happened. Liam didn't show up to school for 3 days. When attendants called the house, no one answered. A welfare check was requested and deputies found the house empty. Detective Crawford and his son were gone. Captain Burton called me that evening. He said Crawford had disappeared with Liam once he learned Internal Affairs was expanding their investigation, that they'd found other victims, other children Crawford had hurt over the years, that my video had prompted several people to come forward who'd been too scared before. Burton said warrants were being issued for Crawford's arrest on multiple charges, including child abuse and obstruction of justice. They'd also discovered Crawford had been embezzling from evidence funds for years. My illegal video had opened a door that revealed systemic corruption. Burton said that didn't change my legal situation. I was still facing charges for how I'd obtained the evidence, but he wanted me to know that Crawford was running because he was guilty and my actions had exposed it. I asked about Liam. Burton said they'd issued an Amber Alert and were actively searching for both of them, that Crawford was dangerous and they were concerned for Liam's safety. 3 days later, they found them. Crawford had been staying at a motel 2 states away. When police moved in to arrest him, he barricaded them in the room. Negotiators talked to him for 6 hours while Liam sat inside with his father. Finally, Liam convinced Crawford to surrender. He walked out with his hands up and was arrested. Liam was taken into protective custody. The video of Crawford's arrest made national news. Suddenly, the story changed from obsessed teacher stalks family to teacher exposes corrupt detective abusing son. News outlets dug into Crawford's history and found a trail of complaints and suspicious incidents stretching back 15 years. Other victims came forward. The county launched an investigation into how Crawford had escaped accountability for so long. My legal situation got complicated. The county dropped criminal charges against me because prosecuting me while Crawford's abuse became public would look terrible. But Crawford's lawsuit continued. His attorney argued that regardless of what Crawford had done, I'd broken the law and violated his rights. My attorney argued necessity and that my actions had been the only way to protect a child when the system failed. The case went to trial 8 months later. I testified about everything I'd observed. The bruises, Liam's fear, the failed CPS reports, the system's refusal to act because Crawford was law enforcement. The defense brought character witnesses who painted me as unstable and obsessed. They argued I'd stalked a family and fabricated evidence to justify my illegal behavior. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They found in my favor on all counts. The jury foreman said afterward that they couldn't ignore that my illegal actions had saved a child and exposed corruption, that sometimes the law failed and someone needed to break it to do what was right. Liam was placed with his maternal aunt in another state. I got a letter from him 6 months after the trial. He said he was doing better, that he was in therapy and making friends at his new school. He said he understood why I did what I did and didn't blame me for the chaos that followed. He said for the first time in his life, he felt safe. That letter meant more to me than winning the lawsuit. The teaching board reviewed my case and decided not to revoke my license, but no school would hire me. I was toxic, the teacher who'd broken every protocol and somehow gotten away with it. I ended up working at a nonprofit that helped children escaping abusive homes. I used my experience and my story to train other people about recognizing abuse and navigating systems that often protected abusers. 5 years later, Liam was 19 and starting college. We met for coffee and I barely recognized him. He'd grown tall and healthy. The dead look in his eyes was gone. He said I'd saved his life, that if I hadn't risked everything, he wouldn't have survived another year. I told him I'd do it all again. Because some rules exist to protect the system, not the people it's supposed to serve, and sometimes breaking those rules is the only moral choice left. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.